Hi, and welcome back to Making Space to Make. This is week 9, and today we're tackling something that came up over and over again in your comments, and that's work in progress organization. I heard from so many of you saying things like, my projects tend to get all over the place, I have projects on shelves, in boxes, everywhere, but I can't keep track of what stage they're at. This is a huge barrier to actually finishing things, so let's work on fixing it. Today, we're going to talk about systems that actually work for containing active projects, what I've tried that seemed logical but was a disaster, and how I manage everything from small tops to big coats with lots of pieces. Once again, the goal here is not perfection. It's creating a living system that works for you and your brain and your space, so you can actually finish what you start. First, let's talk about why this matters. When your work in progress projects are scattered all over the cutting table, your shelves, and in random boxes, a few things happen. You forget what you have going on, you can't see your projects, so they become out of sight, out of mind, and you end up starting new projects instead of finishing existing ones. You waste time hunting for pieces. Pattern pieces get separated from the fabric, notions go missing. You spend half your time sewing just trying to gather everything back together. Your workspace becomes chaotic. Every surface becomes a dumping ground because projects don't have a proper home. Now, I want to be honest about something, and I mentioned this in the intro to the series, but my natural state is chaos. And to this point, my instinct used to just be to pile everything in a giant pile of projects that needed finishing. This is a terrible disaster of an idea. Don't do that. It strangely does not work well. First, let me tell you about some systems that seemed logical, but were complete failures to me. And again, this is just what didn't work for me. Maybe this would work for you. But first was opaque boxes and bins. Once you put a lid on an opaque box, you've got to be super disciplined, or who knows what's going on in there. I personally cannot use these because, again, out of sight, out of mind kicks in immediately for me. The worst system I tried was a standing wire basket drawer unit. The drawers were too big and too deep, so projects just piled up in there, even though I could see what was in there. We started piling things on top to get them out of the way other places, and it just became a giant pile of chaos very quickly. What has stuck with me over time is using a shallow drawer unit with large clear ziplock freezer bags. And let me show you why this works. First, shallow is key for me. I don't want projects stacked 3 deep because then you're back to the same out of sight, out of mind problem. Second, the Ziploc bags keep everything contained within each drawer. I can have multiple projects in one drawer, but each project stays together in its bag. Third, everything goes in the same place every time. There's no decision fatigue about where this project should live. If you have an IKEA Kallax unit like everyone on earth, myself included, you can get various cubes and containers that fit inside. If you're going to use shelves, I recommend some way to contain the projects first. Don't just pile them directly on the shelf. They'll kind of slide all over, and that's a recipe for chaos too. I use the same basic method for all sizes of garments, but there are some differences. For smaller projects like tops, everything goes into one bag. If you're working in a shared space, you may want to consider putting thread and notions into the bag with it to reduce the need to get things out later. For larger projects like coats, I organize by garment section. So all the outer shell pieces will be together in one bag, facings and linings together in another. I also apply my interfacing at the beginning of each project right after cutting, so I don't have to worry about losing those little fiddly pieces that I really don't want to have to recut. Once a project reaches the point where it can be hung, maybe you've got the basic construction done, I hang it in my sewing room closet. The unfinished pieces do stay in the bag, but the main garment gets hung up. This does 2 things. First, it reduces wrinkling, so you're not pressing everything when you come back to it every time. And second, you can see the project to remind yourself, hey, I need to work on this. Now, let me walk you through how projects move through my system. Everything goes into the bag after being cut. If I need to, I'll label the bag by writing on the back of a sticky note and then putting it inside the bag facing out. That way there's no chance of the sticky note flying off when you're organizing. When I pull out a project to work on, I take everything out and arrange it on my work table. If I have to stop and the garment can't be hung yet, everything goes back into the bag. If it can be hung, the garment gets hung and the loose pieces go back in the bag. For pattern tissue, I make sure I have all the notches and internal markings marked, and then I fold them back up and put them with the project in the bag. If I'm using a large format printed pattern or my oak tag patterns, I punch a hole in them and I hang them in my closet until the project is done. At that point, if I like the garment and I might make it again, they go into a garment rack with my other patterns. If not, I just recycle them. The key is keeping the pattern pieces with their project somehow, either in the bag or in a designated hanging spot until the project is finished, so you can easily reference it if needed. What happens when a project stalls? For me, they live in the same space they did before. After a certain amount of time, I have to decide if I'm ever going to finish it or not. We covered this decision-making matrix back in week 3 with what's worth finishing, so definitely check that out if you have a lot of unfinished projects. This week, I want you to gather your work-in-progress projects from wherever they're currently living. This shouldn't be too hard because we just went through them all a few weeks ago, right? Look at what you actually have going and then think about what is working and what isn't working about your current system. You don't have to implement a whole new system yet. Just assess what you're working with and give it some time to think about what kind of container system might work for you and your space and your brain before you make any decisions. The goal with work in progress organization isn't to have a perfect looking system. It's to have a system that works reliably for your brain and your space so you can actually finish what you start. Don't be afraid to try things out and see what works for you. I honestly did not think my current drawer unit would be a good system for me. I would have guessed that the wire bins would work better, but it was the exact opposite, which really still surprises me. Next week, we'll talk about project tracking and labeling so you can remember where you left off on each project. This can also be helpful for the next time you want to sew something that you've sewn before. So I'll see you back here for that. Happy sewing!